Now, if you have any feedback on the show, please send us your emails to entrep@abn360.com or find us on Twitter. Our handle is @entrepedge. Still in the studio with me, I have Brett Latimer, the man behind Oxford Freshmarket and a entrepreneur and a show jumper, which we'll talk about later in the segment. But okay, so how did you then consolidate your business? Up to 2000 you changed to Cambridge Foods. How did then you expand and consolidate your business?
Okay. Chris, I took a decision that I wanted to capitalize on my efforts over the years, and I wanted to sell the business going forward. I cut down to 5 stores. I got seriously involved in my marketing. I made sure that those 5 stores were highly visible. I spent fortunes on signage, absolute fortunes. I marketed on television. They had regional television at the time. I advertised more than I could afford to on television, in the local newspapers, flyers outside the stores. We constantly had people on the microphone in the stores. I was in the stores, on the mic, on the street, on the mic. Right there, Warwick Triangle, Cambridge Corner. I'd get up in the morning, I'd be out there talking to the customers over the mic in the Warwick Triangle. I'd do the same in Pinetown. We used to get complaints, the police would come, people in the area in the flats were complaining that Cambridge was making a racket. But we pushed it, we drove those 5 stores, and we earned our place within those taxi rank areas.
That's seriously hands-on, I must say, for an entrepreneur. But fast forward then to 2008.
2008.
You were mixed up in the deal that everyone was talking about across Africa. The Walmart, the American store chain, coming in to buy into Massmart here in South Africa. You know, how did it strike you, that deal? It must have been amazing. You were suddenly put into this great big sort of negotiation. How was that?
It was a roller coaster, to say the very, very least. I wasn't intimidated by it. I was really excited by it. My current partner, Paul Beltramo, and he was an employee at the time, he was managing director of Cambridge, sat down one day and said, right, if we're going to sell Cambridge, we need to catch a really big fish. And Guy Hayward from Massmart will support me in saying that I thanked him and that I'd caught a marlin when I caught Massmart. So we stuck the bait out, and we knew that Massmart were looking for a retail footprint in the taxi ranks. I had a very strong suspicion that it was because of Walmart. I knew that Massmart had been courting Walmart. They'd been going to the universities across in America. They'd been interacting with Walmart. And I put 2 and 2 together, and Paul and I were chatting, and I said, how do we get them to come to us as opposed to us going to them? So we had a guy that we knew, and he suggested to one of the guys in the company that he worked for that was part of the Massmart fold that maybe they should think about Cambridge. And Robin Wright gave me a call one day, and my heart was just racing. And it sort of went from there, and I can't tell you how exciting it was.
It must have been every entrepreneur's dream, isn't it? You have a great idea, then all of a sudden these multi-millionaires want to come along and buy it from you. Yeah. Were there any, during those negotiations, must have been some strange and funny moments even when you were dealing with that? I mean, what do you recall?
Well, you're dealing with incredibly intelligent people, highly successful people at a really high level. And whilst I wasn't intimidated by it, I was really on guard. It was exhausting. You know, I was only sleeping for sort of 4 or 5 hours a night, top end. And every day was a challenge to get through this. It took quite a bit of time for the negotiations.
And all along it was, will they, won't they, will they, won't
Absolutely.
they? And what do you remember about that?
Continuous anxiety. But we managed to drive the business. We kept our energies into the business. In fact, it upped my game. We really had to show off. We really had to make sure we did everything right. We really had to drive the business, drive the marketing, encourage the staff. And that was one of my biggest achievements, I think.
Because there's a tremendous anxiety, isn't it, when you're going through these things? The staff suddenly wonder who are going to be working for next week.
And that's the one thing that I would salute, is the Cambridge staff, because they really rose to the occasion. I'd worked shoulder to shoulder with many of them. Many of the management were people that I had been apprenticed to. Sishi was one of them. He was a part of our team. Douglas Shangas. There was a whole bunch of people that I'd previously been apprenticed to that had come all the way through. And working with them, working with the team, pushing Cambridge, marketing Cambridge, putting it on the platform to Massmart. My staff were amazing. And
then you sold out for a fair amount of money.
Yeah, and good for you, Bob.
But they're good for you, Bob. But then you had a 3-year restraint of trade deal, which meant you couldn't do anything within a radius of Cambridge Foods for 3 years. I mean, a lot of people forget about that when they sell businesses, but it must have been hell for you as an entrepreneur to think, well, we can't do what you do. What was it like?
It was, Chris. I was tapping my fingers. It was very difficult. Thank goodness I had the horses. I've got 30 acres outside of Durban and Drummond and 12 really nice show jumpers. I'm not very good at it. The horses are good. And they've got extra strength backs to carry my body weight. But those 3 years were difficult. I had Paul Beltrame, the previous MD, Graham Rose, the financial director, and Melaine, my personal assistant. And we were looking for a business. I had hoped that we would find something in Cape Town. I bought properties in Cape Town. Had this whole movie in my mind of moving to the Western Cape. And then the green grass of KZN came back into play, and I bought a business on the bluff just outside of my restraint area.
But it must have been difficult because you took your team with you from Cambridge, but they, I assume, also were sitting around for 3 years, sort of tapping their fingers.
Yeah, I mean, we bought a couple of properties and renovated them, and we spent a lot of time looking for businesses and hunting them down. But it was frustrating, it really was.
And then all of a sudden you hit on, well, a bit of name recognition, Oxford food, and you were straight back in there. So were you there cooking the meat again at lunchtime with the guys or what? Or those days passed?
No, those days will never pass. I think that the one thing in business that one should never forget is what put you there in the first place. The people that you employed that worked with you, the customers that supported you, and just stick with the basics. Don't lose sight of what you were and who you are.
So did you re-employ any of the people you worked with Cambridge all those years ago?
I was not allowed to.
Oh,
my restraint was in place. I wasn't allowed to. My restraint's up now. It was up on the 1st of April.
Okay, so now we've heard you've had a reasonably pretty successful first year. And I mean, what's your ambition now as an entrepreneur? I mean, do you want to make up another conglomerate and sell it on to another multinational, or what? Or is it this time you want to keep it all at home? What's your plan?
Chris, when I sold Cambridge, it was like selling my family. I'd been with those people for so long and spent so many hours with them. It was like having an old car that you'd really fixed up, you'd optimized. It was sold. I wanted a new car. I wanted to try and do it right from the beginning. Having been educated at Cambridge and getting my foundation degree, because I have an obtuse mind and a bit of a sense of humor, I thought that I should perhaps try and get my Oxford Blues and do my graduate degree at Oxford. And I also thought it might get Massmart's attention and the supplier's attention. And it was quite a nice play in terms of marketing the new company. One of the things that I really thought was missing in the food business in this country was the back to basics. Where do you go to market for your fruit and veg? Which butcher do you go to? Which baker do you go to? Because most people, from my understanding, were getting different parts of their household food requirements at different supermarkets, different cash and carries and wholesalers. And I thought if I could provide a one-stop shop, but in the true blue sense, and if I could get up earlier than my opposition, close later than my opposition, pay my staff better than anybody else, treat my staff better than anybody else, ensure that every single staff member had an opportunity, that every single customer walking into the store could buy his fresh produce, his beautifully prepared meat, could see it being prepared, his beautiful fresh rolls, have a wonderful grocery department, all priced right, thanks to the wonderful opportunity that Massmart gave me to buy through their Shield buying group, that I could open a real business that would be sustainable in the South African market, particularly since no one has any money to waste.
Where do you think the money is these days in the food business, would you say? If you're advising an entrepreneur watching who's never even touched the food business before, what would you advise?
Join Oxford.
Your advice. And what about growing food as well? I mean, there's all this talk now that the cost of food is going up and there's money to be made. Why do you think more people aren't out there, particularly in this continent, growing food? I mean, a lot of people think it's a dirty job and it lacks glory and glamour, but I don't know, what's your theory?
I think that the opportunity to grow food in South Africa is massive. I think that we have a population who are historically involved with the earth. I think South African people, the indigenous South African people, have always been a part of the earth. So I do think that cattle farming, vegetable growing, is definitely an opportunity in South Africa. I think that the biggest single mistake that this country's made is that they haven't got directly involved with educating farmers, assisting farmers. It's one thing giving somebody a tract of land with no tractor, no irrigation, no assistance, no mentorship. I think that, yes, I think the opportunity is enormous and endless.